Okay, the hour is 6 o'clock on the East Coast, 4 o'clock here in Park City. I'd like to call the planning board meeting of January 28th, 2025 to order. Persons who wish to do so are invited to view the meeting at the Gloucester website or join by phone. And you can join through the Gloucester website and guidance for the meeting remotely. So calling meeting to order, introduction to planning board staff and board members. We got Greg Cadamatori on top. My name is Rick Noonan. I'm the chair. Move down here past all of our stable of consultants. We have Sean Henry, Doug Cook, and we have David. I don't know, haven't seen David lately, but he's with us. And we're waiting on Jane Ramsden, our vice chair, and Beverly Bookin is going to be absent this evening. So if you could put the remote or the agenda back up. I'm sorry, Greg.
Sure, sorry. I think I just got I was checking on a message from Alex. Hold on one second.
Okay.
And there we go.
So this is a special meeting. It's a one agenda item, so it's a comprehensive plan update. Laura Smead from JM Goldson to lead a review of the comprehensive plan draft, core theme strategies, and outline for the next phase of public engagement. So I am going to turn it over to Laura, unless Jen has some starting off words. The floor is yours.
Yep, the floor is Laura's. Thank you.
Terrific.
Right. Yeah, thanks. Nice to see you all again. You saw us all, I think, last in person in October, but just a reminder, we have Juliet Walker here with Kittleson, our transportation expert, Emily Innes with Innes Associates, our zoning expert. Jen and I are on all the other topics, and then Anne, except for Anne Furbush from Cambridge Econometrics with the economic development. And I see Jane is joining. Yay. So tonight, we've gone through a lot of work, so let's get into it. I'm excited to be at this stage with you all. It's a really a nice inflection moment. It's kind of, we're approaching the end of phase 3. We're really getting into the home stretch, and this is, I hope, going to be a productive meeting, and we'll be able to work through any remaining issues either tonight or possibly on February 6th if needed. So tonight we want to review the revised draft strategy list. Mainly, we're going to be having a facilitated discussion on the strategies that are remaining kind of in the middle, where people still had more questions about them. They still seemed like there wasn't a clear consensus on whether or not it should wind up being ultimately in the comprehensive plan. And whether it's tonight or February 6th, confirming that draft shortlist, like confirming, yep, these are the ones that are in, these are the ones that are out, and covering the next steps when we get there. So just a reminder what we've done already for vetting those draft strategy ideas. We reviewed them all with you in October, answered questions and things at that time, and then we had 5 technical working sessions, one for each of the core themes. Many of you were there and participated in those. We summarized those results for you and gave them to you in November, and then we took it on the road. We met with 5 different boards and committees. Among the staff and different consultants met with different boards and committees to further vet strategies, and we got the opinions of those boards and committees on a subset of the strategies that were most important to them, and also collected some more strategy ideas from those boards and committees. And then in January, we summarized and sorted and did some revising and wordsmithing and some reorganization after we kind of took all the feedback in and tried to put together something that we thought was going to document what we did, but also provide you with a little bit more of a clear list for what we're actually kind of remaining to discuss tonight. So this is kind of where we were at the end of both the technical working sessions and the road shows. There was about 32 strategies left in the middle, and 37, a very similar number of new strategy ideas. And then you took the pre-work survey. All of you did your homework. You all did such a good job, except for Beverly, who's on vacation, so we can't, fault her too much on that. Mainly, one other thing that we do at this stage is look at, do those, you know, that kind of iterative process. We go back and think, okay, do the themes and the goals still make sense? And one of the things that we noticed as consultants and the staff noticed was that there wasn't a lot of strategies left in the core theme that was on tourism. And we thought it made sense, and also a lot of overlap in those themes. So we thought it made sense to suggest and recommend that core themes 3 and 4 be combined into one. We also received a new goal recommendation around capital improvement planning, and with some strategies suggested under that goal. We're also going to be meeting with the mayor's office a little bit later this month too, to, you know, make sure that language is what that office would like. But and then some strategies got reorganized within existing goals where we were looking like, oh, maybe this really is climate change and it belongs over here, or this is more recreation belongs over there. So there's a little bit of that. And we tried to have a messy Word document where we were tracking all the changes that we were doing and marking up kind of who made what wordsmithing recommendation and so forth, but also have a, you know, more of a clean version for you to review at the end of the day and know kind of where things were at. So you took your pre-work survey. I crunched the numbers today. We have a few more on the elimination pile. There was a number of them that the vast majority of you, when you averaged the numbers, it looked like this one is probably a no-go. More of them that wound up in the shortlist bucket, where there was general consensus that it was a 4 or more. Essentially, it was like positively received. And that left us with 15, which is great because that discussion list got a little smaller. And in terms of the new ideas, understandably, the vast majority of those, at least one of you wanted to discuss. So there are really only 4 of those new ideas that everybody was like, no, like this, no, it's kind of a non-starter. So that is probably where the bulk of our discussion is going to wind up being, is maybe on some of those new strategy ideas. So tonight, this is kind of recaps to what I just said. There's the 14 original strategies and the new ideas. So in a minute here, I'm going to stop sharing this screen and I'll just pull up kind of a Word document, really. And I would like us to prioritize, actually, if I can, core themes 1 and 4, because if the discussion goes long tonight and we need to continue it to February 6th, I want to take advantage of the consultants in the virtual room tonight, and those are the core themes that are most relevant to them. But just so you know, at the end of that discussion, we can circle back and just confirm the short list for removal, what's going in, not the short list removal, the eliminate strategies, the short list. And really anything else, and get into next steps. But I think I might even just cover next steps right now before we get into the long discussion, if I can, just to kind of get through it. It's not too many. Once we do arrive at that strategy shortlist, we would like to have a presentation to the city council, like we've done at the end of kind of every phase, just to keep them in the loop on where we're at with things. And we also have internally sent a future land use vision, sort of future land use maps to staff. We're doing some internal back and forth right now and getting their review on it, but we hope to be able to present that draft to you at your next meeting on February 20th. And then we are meeting with department managers on March 6th to facilitate presentation on the strategy shortlist. There it's less about, is this, because they've been involved kind of all along and kept in the loop, but it's more about feasibility. It's not on should this be in or out of the plan. It's what do you need to make this happen? Is this assigned to the right department? Is this on the right timeline? And what would it take to actually implement this strategy for your department? And what are the priorities? So we'll get their feedback. We'll just do a presentation and then kind of leave it with them for a week and gather comments back from them. And we're also going to be putting together a community survey on just actually the goals. We wanted to take advantage of the mayor's State of the City speeches that are happening actually starting this week. So, and also there's a lot of strategies to go through. So we thought it would make best sense to ask the community which goals in each core theme are the top priority for them for implementation. And be able to feature that then in the final plan and kind of highlight whatever goals rise to the top as being the most important to the community. And that will start, late January and run through mid-March. And so in March 20th is when I think we're going to be really able to put everything all together for you with, vision, core theme, goals, final strategy list, most important strategies, what we heard from the department manager meeting, all of that good stuff all together on March 20th. So without further ado, unless there are questions on that, I'll pull up the Word document and we'll start getting into the weeds.
And I'd ask folks, obviously we're in a remote setting and I can't see everybody. So if you do have a question, just, it's tough to raise your hand when I can't see you. So just say, hi, I'm Jane, I have a question. Okay. I wasn't picking on you, Jane. So I don't think we have any questions at this point, Laura, if you want to move forward.
Okay. So this Word document is very similar to the clean strategy list that you all reviewed for this meeting, but now it reflects the results of the pre-work survey. So where this is, I'm kind of redlined already. So what I did was, if it's on the short list, we think it's highlighted in green. If it's on the list for discussion, it's highlighted in yellow, including the new strategy ideas. And if it's changed in some way, I marked it for its new coloring, like this one, 1C6. In the pre-work survey, that averaged out to be a 4. There's general consensus that that should be on the short list. And so I just marked it with a comment that this averaged 4 in the pre-work, and now it's colored green. But I at least want to highlight it in case there's, people want to take issue with any particular thing and want to have a discussion about anything, we can definitely do that. And then of course, anything in yellow is still on the list for figuring out what to do with it. Okay, so if that makes sense, let's just kind of begin at the beginning of core theme 1, and then we'll see how far we get and then jump to core theme 4. Does that sound like a plan?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the first new strategy ideas that we have are under this goal 1A, which is to capitalize upon emerging opportunities to grow the blue economy, working waterfront and ocean related industries. There were a few new strategy ideas, mainly from the Economic Development, is it Improvement Committee, EDIC, discussion with Ann Furbush.
The Economic Development Industrial Corporation.
And thank you. Yeah, the acronyms are going to kill me. So one is to activate the Jodrell State Fish Pier through public-private partnership for seafood processing, aquaculture, and other allowable water-dependent uses. One is to, and I did take a little bit of leeway here on this one. I think the comment was really, if I understood it right, and they are interested in activating the I4C2 site. And so I found this 2010 concept proposal that had been done for it and interpreted that as sort of wanting to implement the next steps for that Gloucester Harbor Innovation Center at that site, since there had already been some planning work, it looked like, around that. So, there's no ego here. If there's anything I said in there that should be wordsmithed, please let me know. And then the last one is sort of per the harbor plan, evaluate FEMA flood maps and the federal navigational channel to tailor the Inner Harbor or Lobster Cove to the current and future working waterfront needs.
And so Laura, here you're looking for feedback on these strategies or the new strategy.
Yes, yes, they're new strategy ideas. They were flagged by at least one planning board member as wanting to be discussed. Some of them were flagged by multiple. And so we're really just having a discussion. Do you feel like they should be in the short list or not in the short list? Or if they're in the short list, should they be wordsmith in some way?
I don't think the Inner Harbor is Lobster Cove, or did you mean a different Inner Harbor?
I think on this one, we were taking the literal words from what
So
they said.
I think there's a little bit of two things going on here, and I imagine this may have been this was input from the EDIC meeting. It was probably something that Tom Balfe had introduced. So there's two pieces. There's one that's looking at there's an opportunity to look at the federal channel, and there's what's called the project area. This is highly technical. It's maybe not necessarily a strategy. It's more like a implementation task relating to facilitating opportunities for expanded dockage. The other piece of looking at the FEMA designation is they're kind of two separate things. So the reason why Lobster Cove was identified was that had occurred in the past where there was an evaluation of basically the channel and the Army Corps' designation. If you go through that process and kind of de-designate a certain area, it becomes under more local control. So there's a lot of specifics in here, and I'm trying to figure out if there might be a better way to more generalize that to the strategy of ensuring that FEMA flood designations are appropriate to stimulate economic development and evaluate the federal project area for the potential for expanding dockage. So I think if people think these ideas should be in as strategies, I think it just needs to be reworked to be maybe a little bit less specific and more around the strategy. And these are kind of like the actual implementation steps.
Yeah, so Laura, I have trouble, the whole survey that I did, this is the trouble that I had. These seem like action items to me rather than strategies. And so if your goal is reduce the amount of virus going around, it seems like your strategy would be make everybody wash their hands more often. And your action item would be put a sign in all the bathrooms to tell people to wash their hands. And so this feels very specific, as do a lot of the others, which is why I had trouble with them. And also, so something like activate the Jodrey Fish Pier through public-private partnership, I don't know what that means. It sounds good, but does it cost the city of Gloucester money? I mean, I don't want to make a recommendation in a vacuum here and just be like, this is what we should do. Doesn't matter if it costs $2 million, which we don't have. So I have trouble with all of these because they're so specific.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Jane. A lot of the additional strategy ideas that came from additional meetings that were held with boards and committees to just, ensure that nothing was missing. I think just where being a participant in a lot of those meetings, I think where their head was at was just into specifics. So they were kind of laser focused. I think our work is to look at some of these ideas that are mentioned that are, like you said, on the action level and kind of draw it back up to the strategy level and see if it's worth incorporating into the plan. I think all three of these have a little are too specific. I was going to mention the 1A8 I think there should be a recommendation on activating and establishing a vision for both the Jodrey State Fish Pier as well as the I4C2 site, but these are too specific of details to allow for a community process to establish a vision for what that activation looks like.
thanks. I agree.
Right, and I guess the way I view these three items are, you know, again, very, very specific, but overall, taken together, it would be a step in the right direction, right? I
I
mean,
totally agree. I just don't know what it means.
well, I
Okay.
mean, the fish pier is not necessarily, you know, 100% occupied, right? I mean, everybody's.
I don't mean that. I just mean, I don't understand what the ramifications are. Like,
Right.
I understand each of the steps, but
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
there's a lot more to be thought about before we just go activate the Jodrey State Fish Pier.
Yeah, so I think for that one, it should be about creating a community supported vision for the future of the fish pier. I think public-private partnership is right. Seafood processing, aquaculture, and water-dependent uses are right. I think talking about consistency with the harbor plan is important for this recommendation, and working with mass development since they own the pier and would need to be involved. And I think making sure the appropriate stakeholders are at the table for any kind of process to establish a vision there would be the important things to mention at the strategy level.
Yeah, I
So
would agree.
I'm wondering, to Jane's point, is there, in the way that this gets presented, are there strategies and then are there action steps? And is that the way that Jane Goldson is thinking about this? Should they be separate things as opposed to everything being put into strategies?
So we do at a strategy level. Oh, and Jen has her hand raised as well. I mean, go ahead, Jen, if you want to talk through strategy versus implementation
Yeah.
matrix.
Yeah, you know, where we leave this off into the hands of the multiple department managers and boards and whatnot who are going to be implementing in it, we basically give you the strategy. Sometimes, Jane, they may read as very specific if that's something that came out of the community process, but it's essentially up to a combination of the boards and committees that will ultimately be doing these things and the department managers to create, well, how are we really going to do this? What are our action items? But that's not something that we would be scoped to include in the basic plan that we'll give you.
And you'll see, you know, all the other recommendations that were developed over a long period of time are not as specific unless there's something that needs to be called out. So it's really just these additional ideas that came in here through the boards and committee meetings that we had. So I think you'll notice those ones are more specific and need to be brought up to the strategy level.
And Jane, I think you made a good point too about making sure that the strategies are targeted at the city. Because, you know, like you say, activate the state pier. Well, what does that mean for the city? So making sure as we review these, I noticed, you know, I was facilitating the discussion with EDIC, and a lot of people have really great ideas about what they would like to have happen, but not all of those are things that the city is in the position to do. So making sure that we're focusing on action items for the city.
And so, you know, I think the city's role in those two strategy ideas is really to facilitate a public process to get community buy-in for a vision. So I think those recommendations should really be emphasizing that. For the recommendation around I4C2, we definitely need to remove the mention of the Gloucester Harbor Innovation Center. Because there's been a lot of concepts proposed for the site, and they were proposed a very long time ago. I think any process to find what the community would like to see there should build upon previous planning efforts and all the ideas that have been provided. There's been a lot of work to look at the feasibility of the site, whether it could handle a development and so forth. So that I think could be referenced, but yeah, those first two recommendations, I think, are really about facilitating a community process for a vision at both those sites.
Which is strategy language as opposed to activate and implement.
Yeah, I think the EDIC is just kind of action oriented and they couldn't help
Yeah, well,
themselves.
I mean, and
Yeah.
they should be,
Mhm.
just not sure it belongs in that form in a strategy plan, in a master plan. And I'm going to recuse myself from the Lobster Cove thing because that's where I live and I don't want FEMA here. Mhm. Or I don't want it to be a federal navigation channel because that would make it where I swim off my dock not very fun.
So it sounds like the planning board is positive about these concepts. It's just a matter of wordsmithing them to be the right level and focused at what the city can do related to facilitating a public process and a vision for these locations, but that these locations are still valuable places to kind of mention for economic development. Is that fair?
I
Yes,
think so.
yeah.
So are
Yeah.
we ready to move on to the next
I just have a
goal,
quick
or?
question.
Sure.
How does
Okay.
that relate back to the harbor plan? Does it all tie into that? I mean, it kind of makes sense to go from that effort.
Yeah, so I think that Alex mentioned that they should be cross-referenced, right? We should mention that it would be consistent with the harbor plan. Yeah, and I made a little note of that, so we can go back to anything that's, remaining to be discussed. If we need to, we can do any kind of like final wordsmithing language stuff on February 6th potentially. So I might want to, take notes tonight, see how far we get, and then present, okay, how's this language at the next meeting?
And Laura, if you
All
just want to make a note behind Lobster Cove. Lobster Cove is in Ansquam on the western side of the Cape. It's not in the inner harbor of the working south or north channel of,
Okay.
so Shane can go swimming.
Or I can comment on the strategy if you take out Lobster Cove. I mean, it really isn't the inner harbor. It's completely different, but I understand why it's there because the federal navigation channel may or may not reach into there. So.
Okay.
The discussion on moving the federal channel further east has always been predicated off of, essentially the building center, and it's not Smith Cove, but there's another term for it. So,
Right. I can follow up offline.
Yeah.
With staff and stuff and make sure we get the right language. But I think I have a good understanding of what we're doing with those strategies. All right. So the next one that's still in the middle is under goal 1C, encourage an adequate housing supply of all types, sizes, and costs. The strategy is to add design review process for site plan review and special permits to create development standards and design guidelines for the review process. Identify specific districts such as the downtown or uses such as mixed use for which design review is appropriate. And this one was really, in the middle. And I'll also mention that this one above it was in the middle, but there was general agreement to include it.
Can you just clarify whether you mean section 4 in the previous one and section 6 in the next one? Or are they both supposed to be the same section?
Oh, look at that. Yeah, that should be the same. Thank you for catching that.
Oh, well, that's what threw me off because I was like, how are we talking about section 4? Oh, there's a section 6. Oh, no.
Yeah, and if that's the case, I think those could be combined to say, put all the zoning definitions into that section of the zoning ordinance. And address make sure they're consistent with the recommendations of the comp plan. I think that could just be one recommendation if that's referring to the
But
same
again,
section.
that's an action item. And what it really ought to say is review the zoning ordinance for, consistency and efficiency. That's the strategy, right? Moving the
Yeah,
definitions is pretty specific.
Yeah, I agree. It could be more broad in terms of just an audit of the zoning ordinance
Because,
for consistency with the plan.
I didn't look up I don't know where section 4 came from. I don't know where the definitions are right now. I didn't look that up and think about it. I don't even know where it came from.
I would agree with the statement that Alex just made. It's probably more an audit for consistency and organization, because
Yeah.
there are definitely a couple of schools of thought here. There are a number of definitions that are in section 3 that were specifically moved back in 2008 to that section because there was concern that people weren't going to grasp all that as it related to non-conforming lots and a lot of things that are discussed in that section. So they were pulled from 6 and moved into 3. So there's definitely a is it working the way it should be? So it's more of an audit for kind of like organization and function.
And efficiency.
Yep.
Emily, do you have any thoughts on these strategies?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I think that the higher level goal of what you just said about reorganizing for efficiency, for clarity, another common strategy at this point, or common component of the implementation plan would just be to make sure that, and I think I saw it further down as I was doing a re-review of the materials, is making sure that you align the zoning to the recommendations of the comprehensive plan. So those two could end up being grouped together under one portion of this, but that's kind of the higher level. And then I think you're right, moving the definitions, adding the definitions, other components like that start becoming actions within that larger strategy.
So with regard to design standards in site plan review, I'm very mixed about that or design review process, because I think it's really subjective. It's really hard to create. I'd love to have it. Would I love to have it? I'd love to have it. But I'm not sure it's fair or right. And I think it might take more discussion. And so, just a recommendation to add design review process, again, might be too specific. Like maybe we should review whether or not we should have a design review process. Greg, what do you think about design?
I think it isn't. I think it would be valuable. There's a lot of situations where, an applicant is kind of not shadowboxing, but they're left with some very generalized guidelines rather than standards. So there's definitely some room there. But I think and evaluate is probably the word, rather than saying just do it, which makes it sound like, it's on the list. We have to check off and do it. It's something that has to be carefully considered. There's thresholds,
Exactly.
how far do we go?
Right.
But it's definitely something we've heard. And I think it's not just from the public, it's also just from the process in general, to be fair to everybody involved. So I would say that moving it to evaluation is probably the right way.
Okay, so I took an attempt at wordsmithing here. If it moves to more of a level of, you're going to discuss it and evaluate whether or not it's something you actually want to do and get into the specifics of what it would look like, is that then a strategy that you would like to include in the plan?
Yes.
Yeah.
For me, yes.
Yeah. And I think that again, with Jane's concern about, taking on the evaluation process and what goes into site plan review or design review. But yes, if we had those, those barriers, so the applicant could look and say, yes, okay, here are the standards within design review. This is what we're going to be looking for. It reduces the amount of time and work that an applicant would have to put into something to get approved, right? And so, and again, it's, we just went through one recently, and it's entirely subjective. You ask 5 people, you get 10 different opinions, right? So if we had that standard, it would make everybody's job a little easier, I believe. But it takes a little while and a lot of work to sort of establish those standards, right?
Also, I'd be more comfortable if you took out such as the downtown. And I didn't know if that or is supposed to be 4. But,
Mhm.
Okay. thank you.
so identify specific districts or uses such as mixed use for which design, yeah, I mean, that's fine, but we can't be targeting, right now, we cannot be targeting downtown for multifamily
So I've got a
Design standards,
question.
though.
or
is
design
important.
review or anything.
Design standards is the way to go, is to
Yeah.
focus on developing our design standards.
So
So
in
not
one-
guidelines, standards. You want to put it right in the bylaw.
If I may, one of the terms that I typically use are, and Laura, this goes to your point, I usually
Mhm.
use development standards for what goes in the bylaw, and then
Mhm.
design guidelines for that outside document
Yeah.
that the
Right.
planning
That
board
makes
can
sense.
adopt and use. Just
Okay.
sometimes design guidelines is used for everything, and I just find breaking it up like
Mhm.
that helps with clarity.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at. I'm like, are we baking it into the bylaw? Are we having a separate document, or are we kind of doing both? It sounds like you're doing both, and one might refer to the other. Okay. Good. Okay. Are we ready to move it along?
Just a
okay.
question about that,
Yes.
which is in 1C7, we now say discuss and evaluate whether to, and then below that we say consider, and below that we say review. Should we be consistent in 1C7 and just say consider adding design review? Because I look at this and go, what's the difference between these things? Let's have some consistent language.
Makes no difference to me.
Yeah, that's fine.
David, do you like to consider things or evaluate things?
I like to
No.
evaluate them, honestly.
I like to evaluate.
Then say
Consider is
evaluate.
like, consider feels a little bit less committal to actually
That's my
doing it.
point.
Yeah.
That's the point, right? Which is
I like evaluate. It's good action.
All
Use
right.
evaluate.
Well, we can
Considerable
make
evaluation.
evaluate here
one
too.
C. Yeah, exactly.
And evaluate in 1C9 also.
And yeah, and then 1C10, it has that.
Ooh,
Okay.
perfect.
All
I'm
right.
glad to see in 1C12 update the housing production plan. We talked about that at our last meeting, so that's good.
I know,
Yeah.
it's an action item, just saying, but that's
Yeah.
fine, because we need to do it anyway. Rather than a strategy.
All right, so goal 1D has a few here. So goal 1D is adopt policies and programs to promote housing stability for residents at all life stages, prioritizing young adults, families, and older adults. There's a few in the middle from the original list, and there are a couple new ideas that you wanted to discuss. So the first one is to provide funding and support to social services and housing agencies to create new day shelters, transitional housing, supportive services, and permanent supportive housing.
So I think who would not want to do that, except where do you get funding? I mean, that's just like pretty scary, right? Like
So
very
we in our
specific,
implement
and where does it come from?
Yeah, so we always, in the implementation matrix where we can identify funding sources, we put resources and funding sources for you in that implementation matrix. But obviously, if circumstances change on any of these strategies and you're unable to find or raise the funds, then you can't do the strategy. But, you know, the implementation, well, I mean, feasibility is important, but.
Yeah, it sounds like you're asking the city to provide funding. And so maybe you're asking the city to seek funding, right? Or, I mean, I'm not
Right.
sure really what the right thing is, but.
I see. So is it more that you're going to seek funding and support?
I don't know how these things work. I think it's great to support social services and housing agencies, and I think we
Right.
need new day shelters and transitional housing. I don't
Yeah.
know how it works.
Yeah, it can come from multiple sources, and it kind of depends on
It's not
what
coming from the Gloucester
systems-
budget, I don't think.
Yeah, I think for sure, it's the role of the city to help find grant funding, be that on the state or federal level, to help this sort of thing. It is a question of whether local grant funding, like for instance, Affordable Housing Trust or CPC funds or CDBG funds that the city receives from the federal government could be used here. That's a question. The most powerful thing to do would actually be to consider committing local funds so that could be a discussion item. But in the very least, I think it's the city's role to help find funding and maybe other resources, because it may not just be funding, it may be publicly owned land or facilitating some kind of agreement in that way.
I think to David's point earlier, if it's phrased, evaluate funding sources and other resources to support social services, that puts it more again in a evaluation mode or bucket, as opposed to Jane's point, the city has to do this, find the money for it.
Right, it's not a mandate.
Right.
Right.
And to a certain degree, I think there's, housing authority, and there are a bunch of other resources within the city that have this focus already, right? I mean, it's not a new idea, right?
Okay, so with that wordsmithing adjustment, is that feeling
Yeah.
a little better?
Mhm.
Okay. All right, next up is form a City Hall working group to explore the creation of a community land trust and limited equity co-op models to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing and create affordable home ownership opportunities.
So again, sorry, same comment. It's an action item. And who doesn't want to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing and create affordable home ownership opportunities? But I don't know if a community land trust and limited equity co-op model, which I don't even know what that is the right way to go about it.
So this one already
I'm
does kind
hesitant
of
to recommend it, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, this one is already worded as in you're exploring that. So you don't have to, make that decision right this moment. But I don't know if Jen wants to chime in here too on community land trusts, but essentially it's a way for the city to or a nonprofit, even a separate nonprofit, to own the land and lease it out to be able to have people sort of own the house but not the land, and it makes it more affordable than to own or rent the property.
So maybe that's a weird terminology, because my only familiarity with community land trust is the trust for open space.
Well, there was a community land trust in Gloucester. And it merged with Harbor Light Housing, and it created 65 units or so throughout the city. So we've had that. And again, to the point that, Jane was raising, where these are specific action steps, as opposed to exploring things. I think here, rather than say form a City Hall working group, it could say explore the creation of a community land trust. And I would also add something here about Harbor Light Housing, because this is what they do. And
Right.
why reinvent the wheel?
Correct.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's important to mention community land trust as a strategy for preserving naturally occurring affordable housing, because it's really the cost of the land that contributes to the incredibly expensive housing here in Gloucester and across Massachusetts. And the way to combat that is to have more publicly owned land that we're saying we want to dedicate to affordable housing. I think it's important to talk about building upon efforts of community partners, and it's great what Harbor Light does, but I'd just be cautious about specifically mentioning Harbor Light and not say another organization that does the work too.
You
So
could
what we
say,
can
for example.
Yeah,
Part.
Yeah, well, and we don't actually have to necessarily put it right here in the strategy language. I put it in a comment because in the implementation matrix, we list different resources and different kind of even organizations, local organizations right there in the matrix. And so I noted it as an organization, but we might, you know, reference it. I would suggest we reference it in the implementation matrix rather than in the strategy itself, unless they're the kind of go-to thing for the strategy. And I just wanted to also mention limited equity co-op models because it sounded like there's a question as to what that is. So that's rather than having you know a condo building or something like that, that it is at a market rate. A limited equity co-op model is where all of the people who own that in sort of a home ownership, homeowners association agree to have their equity grow at a more limited amount every year so that the rates stay lower below market rate by agreement, but nothing is deed restricted in a traditional affordable housing sort of way. So it often is more affordable to buy into it and you all own it together. So you all have to, you know, pay for any repairs and things together, but it does tend to be more naturally affordable, but not, you know, the kind of traditional model.
Yeah, so if you have a
the
deed
model.
restricted affordable unit that you would be accumulating equity on because you own the unit, this is saying that a portion of that equity goes into keeping the housing in that area affordable for the next person.
Thank
So
you. Yeah. That makes sense.
So can I ask a question about that? Because I see in the document a number of times it talked about naturally affordable housing.
What is that?
What is that?
I could
So-
take that one. I mean,
Yeah, go ahead, Bert. Go for it.
I may be responsible for that term showing up in the document. So it's basically it's housing in the marketplace. So it's not deed restricted like a capital A affordable housing unit, but it tends to be more affordable either because it's smaller or because it's older. You could think about it like this: a big single family home in the marketplace is going to be unattainable for most people because it's going to be priced around $1 million. You need a big down payment to get it. But if you have an accessory dwelling unit, that may be available to rent. Or if you have a smaller condo in a 3-family building, it's going to be more attainable because it's smaller. You're not going to need to buy it, or if you do need to buy it, it'll be relatively less expensive than, say, a big single family home. So some people like to think of it as big A and little a. So big A would be like a deed restricted affordable home, and little a would be like that naturally occurring affordable housing that's affordable in the marketplace.
Is there a definition section then to the master plan?
We often do include a glossary, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to a point that was made before, because that question about strategy versus implementation, I had understood from Jen that there isn't going to be implementation, but I think Laura, you've just mentioned twice that there actually is going to be an appendix that is going to be about an implementation matrix.
Yes, we create an implementation matrix. So there's the plan, which will be the pretty publicly accessible document with laid out beautifully with all the photographs, and it outlines a little bit of the process and the vision and the goals and strategies, and has glossary and so forth. And then there's an implementation matrix, which is done in Excel. You know, it's not as beautiful, but it's extremely practical because it has all the columns of your, you know, what goals, its strategy on there, but you know, time frame. It's a short, medium, long-term strategy. What's the key responsible department? Who's the key responsible board or committee? Who are some of these other groups that are involved with the implementation of it? What are various funding sources, and where might you find there? Are there other case studies or resources that, you know, that we can link for you? And we just kind of build it all out. And then it allows you to also just play with it and own it and have it be yours and add more columns to it around notes or where things are at or barriers or anything you want. And it becomes more of a living working document as opposed to the plan, which is a little more static. It's a PDF, you know.
Okay.
It doesn't have all those nice notes. So it's meant to be more of a working resource, but we do encourage you to have a version that is viewable on a public website, so that if people are interested in tracking the status of any particular strategy, that they're able to at least have an idea of kind of, you know, where it's at in progress or anything like that. So
Yeah,
I'm
well,
glad
well
to hear
said,
that.
Laura. And just to clarify, David, I think it's David who had asked the question. What I was trying to say before is what you see here is the level we'll take it to. So if you want us to step back and make these a little broader, less action-like, that's fine. But what you're doing here is creating the last level that we create. And we take these, what we call strategies, you can call some of them action items, we can change the way we're wording them, but what you see in this list, we take those, put them into that implementation matrix, that spreadsheet, exactly like you agree on in this document. There aren't action items beyond this. There's not another level that we provide beyond this. So the people who will be implementing each of these strategies, whether it's a board or committee, commission, department managers, whoever it is, will then figure out, well, what are the actions we need to do to implement this? So that was we're not providing that level of detail, but we are making an implementation matrix out of this that shows potential funding sources, responsible parties, case studies, all those things that Laura just said. So I hope that clear.
yeah, so we want to set you up for success so that when you are ready to get more specific on a given strategy, you have some places to start to create that punch list for how to actually get it done. Yeah.
Thanks for clarifying.
That makes a lot of sense, but I do think it's worth reviewing these to like 1D6, for example. Like if you just flip those two sentences and say something like, you know, Gloucester strategize to make home ownership more accessible and maintain the housing stock, you know, by, for example, expanding federally funded first-time home buyer rate, right? So like, or I don't know, explore strategies to make home ownership more accessible, or whatever word we were using, evaluate strategies to make.
Well, yeah, I like that idea, Jane. When we notice that there's specific teetering on action items within the strategies, we may just generalize it and then say, for example, and refer to what is kind of in the area of action item.
Yeah.
And and again, we're pretty, near the top of this exercise, and it seems as though, at least from the planning board's perspective, that, strategies and, action, this document may need to be reviewed just with those two, criteria, to soften the language and, to evaluate versus, start a new committee, right? I guess is, sort of a broad sort of wordsmithing exercise versus going through every item.
Yeah, so if that's the case, I think that can be reviewed. And then if we notice that sort of thing tonight, maybe we can just chalk it to that's going to be addressed, and then return to focusing our energy just on the yellow strategies. Are they in or out?
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So as a concept of 1D5, are we feeling like that is in or out with the wordsmithing?
Yeah. Well,
would
other
say
people
in.
should weigh in. I think it's great.
I would say in.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, again, it's one of those items that, of course, you're for it, right? But 2 years from now, somebody opens up this document and says, it's right here in the plan. You guys got to do something, right? And here are the implementation strategies, and, how do you go about that, right? And so, yes, it's the right thing to do. I don't know how you move it up from out of the starting blocks. Is the only concern.
Yeah, so like I said, we're going to give you some resources and things in the implementation matrix that kind of get you to that next step. But often, as you said, these strategies, they live at a little bit of a higher, broader level. So there is often more planning work to be done to figure out how to do it. And when you get into the weeds, if it's just turns out to be not viable, then it's not viable. But these are policy discussions and decisions that it seems like the city is interested in pursuing. And it's not, chiseled in stone, right? You're not, this isn't a, right. It's not something you're committed to doing. It's just something you are committed to exploring.
And I guess, I'm feeling Jane's pain a little bit where if that's the case, we have a strategy and implementation, we're only really seeing half of the document, right? And so we're not looking at 1D5, here's the strategy, and here's the corresponding implementation, right? So I think I'm struggling with it, Jane's struggling with it, and it's tough to make a decision when you only see half the picture.
Well, actually, Rick, what they're saying is this is the implementation as well. They'll give us resources to implement it, which we don't see here, but
yeah, but that's my point. We don't see that part.
Yeah. Okay.
For us to make sense of it, right?
Yeah.
So we did for the ones that are here in this original list, at least there were, as part of the technical working session packets and things, there were, links and things that we included and that session we had back in October also to kind of try to ask questions. So you might be able to even look back at some of that documents as well. But so 1D7, this is about local preference. So give local preference to already displaced households when creating development agreements and applying for local preference from the state as affordable housing is ready to be marketed.
I don't really know what that means.
So anytime affordable housing comes online, the city can apply to the state to reserve 70% of it for Gloucester residents.
Oh, so then it should be capital A affordable.
Yeah, that's referring to capital A affordable. And in terms of giving preference to displaced individuals, that can be done through a development agreement. That would be the mechanism to be able to do that. So, say somebody was living in an affordable unit, their deed restricted expired, their rent went market rate, and they were displaced. We'd have a record of that because they used to live in a unit that had a deed restriction. So you could try and give them preference for new units coming on, just recognizing that, we don't want to lose longtime Gloucester residents.
Yeah, and you're only allowed to do that once, but and it's not just for residents, it's also for people who work here or have kids in the school system.
But my read on this and my problem with it was that it seems like there are two levels of preference. You're establishing a local preference, and then you're wanting to create a separate list of those local applicants to say, are you displaced? Have you been displaced? When this other family might not have been displaced, but has the same need for that unit of affordable housing. It just seems like it complicates the decision tree in how you allot that unit of housing. You have two levels of.
I mean, sometimes there are development agreements and sometimes there aren't. So anyone who's displaced might be able to apply for any number of different options for a new affordable unit. And the city is going to be somewhat limited in their opportunities to give a new housing unit to an individual who's displaced or to those who have that need, because it's really when the opportunity arises, right, of there is a new development happening with affordable units, that you can make the case to the state that, yeah, have a local need here for local preference.
Yeah,
know
typically
if
a development agreement would come into play if the city was using land or its own resources in exchange for something specific. So that might be a time where if it's the priority to try and bring back anyone who has been displaced, that you may prioritize them, but it could say potentially and consider dedicating a portion of new units to displaced individuals. But I agree, Sean. I mean, it's a tough call to make.
And I guess, and if you have a better information, Alex, I think that, every, capital A deed restricted development that this planning board has done in the last, 10 or 15 years, it's always come up that we should have local preference. And the answer was always come back that unless the city spends city money to build out like a Cameron's for 30 units, and if you're in that HUD Section 8 mechanism, that local preference is not permissible, right?
Yeah,
And so,
there are two separate things, and that's something I think that should be clarified. So let's say you just get inclusionary units that come in through the zoning ordinance, or you have a 40B and there's affordable units that are built through it. You can just when the units come online, you make an application, the city makes an application to the state and says, we would like to have a certain percent of these units reserved for Gloucester residents and others that are eligible for local preference. And within that, the state actually has some parameters and guidelines for reserve this many for seniors, reserve this many for veterans, etc. That's one thing. And then if a development agreement is coming into play, it's because the city's giving funds to something, or the city's allowing a developer to use land that it owns, and in exchange for that is asking for things in return, like affordable housing units, and there'd be a development agreement. And that would actually be the only time that you could do something so specific as saying, we want to have a certain unit amount of units reserved for people who've been displaced.
okay. So I guess the follow-up question is then who manages those units? Does it go through the housing authority? And what's
well, yeah, I mean, it depends on, who the development partner is. You could, say put out a RFP for publicly owned property, and then whoever wins the bid and meets the criteria and expectations and enters the development agreement with the city, they would be the ones managing it. Could be the housing authority if it was a partnership with the housing authority. But it could also be a nonprofit partner.
And I guess, again, this is getting back to that action thing. And to me, it sounds incredibly granular and it almost creates false hope. And it seems incredibly complicated. So I don't know that this would ever see the light of day in reality, is my point.
Well, I mean, I've seen it happen all the time, like in terms of applying for local preference to the state when affordable units happen. That happens all the time.
Let me just jump in, because there's, as Alex pointed out, there are two different things. Our ordinance states that we request local preference with every unit that's created under an inclusionary. So we already do it. Every time one's created, we have to send in a letter to the state and provide the justification that we can for that local preference. So that's nothing new. I think it's just this other piece of, it sounds like it's a little bit specific, limited potential application where, the city might be the driver of using city-owned land, that type of thing. I guess you could think about those things, but to leap to, we want to do that. Development agreements are complicated. There are often a lot of different things that you're hoping to achieve with it. So I kind of agree that it's a little specific and maybe limited in its application.
Yeah, I think it might be better for this recommendation to focus on established priorities for things the city would want in return for public resources when drafting a development agreement, and prioritize potentially giving opportunities to displaced individuals. It could be other things too, like prioritize affordable family-sized units. So it's like, if you're gonna have a development agreement, establish the priorities of things that you'll be asking for in those development agreements.
So why don't we say evaluate establishing priorities for local preference for giving local preference, whatever.
I think we probably, to Greg's point, the local preference thing is a little confusing because
Okay.
that's something we apply for when development comes online.
Mhm.
Greg is pointing out that we already do it, so we don't need to mention it here. I think it's more about what do we prioritize that the city requests in return when we're entering development agreements.
That makes more sense to me.
Are you still talking about deed restricted affordable housing now? Or any development agreement?
We're under the housing bucket here, so yeah, we're talking about housing, deed restricted housing.
Yeah, so we need to say deed restricted.
And so just to clarify, deed restriction refers solely to Section 8 or other housing mechanisms?
I mean, just any affordable housing that's required to be affordable per deed restriction, that could come in
Right,
multiple
so you need
ways.
to have deed restricted in front of that A affordable, or you capitalize the A just to be consistent.
I think it's more about
I think we're-
prioritize deed restricted affordable housing when creating development agreements.
Yeah, and I would scrap the deed restricted
Yeah.
piece. You can have a rental development that has a, long-term affordability without being deed restricted. The affordability agreement is what, from the funders is what makes it affordable, not a deed. It's technically not a deed restriction all the time. So I think if you just do capital
Okay.
A affordable housing, that'll cover it. Yep.
Sorry, Jen, you said, did you use capital A affordable housing?
Yeah, I would just
Or-
use a capital A affordable, so we know we're talking about affordable, official affordable, but it doesn't necessarily only relate to deed restricted. It could be a rental development that's has a regulatory agreement and is not technically deed restricted.
I'd still be more comfortable if it said evaluating or evaluate prioritizing. So it's not a mandate. It's a consideration.
Yeah, technically none of these are mandates, but I understand where you're going with that. All right, so evaluate prioritizing affordable housing in development agreements such as local preference to already displaced households. Did I get that about right, or am I missing something?
Why don't you just say preference to avoid confusion with the other local preference?
Such as,
What
oh,
you're saying, oh, okay.
Or such as giving opportunities to already displaced households. Just avoid preference because it causes confusion with local preference, which is a separate thing.
okay. And with that, I'm assuming this is in the short.
Right.
Alrighty, so there are two more new ideas here under the same goal. One is to identify investment opportunities and incentive strategies that support working artists with affordable studio spaces, including a review of relevant zoning codes and tax incentives. So this is, I think the thrust of this strategy is really specific to trying to have more affordable housing for artists and live workspaces And the next one is maintain a public database or vacant properties and their development potential.
Yeah, so I'll just comment here because I facilitated this discussion with the Committee for the Arts. And this was a very important issue for the committee. Has talked about frequently about many working artists in Gloucester that are having their rents for their studio spaces going up to the point where they need to leave. So it's a real threat to the culture and vibrancy of the city, which has a strong history of artists, you know, harkening back to Rocky Neck, and everything that the city does to promote art today. So I just want to emphasize this is a very important strategy for them. And some of the things that they mentioned that were on the action detail level were, you know, where are there opportunities when, say, public buildings are no longer used, rather than to tear them down, could we consider using them for artist workspaces? Because in that situation, there's not a big need to have a brand new development, just something that's kind of up to code is what artists are looking for. And actually, you know, if you're looking at like schools, classroom spaces, they see as excellent examples of that. There's a lot of really cool examples of that that's been done in other cities with cultural districts across Massachusetts, like Gloucester has. And so I think it also kind of relates to the development agreement conversation they were having, is, you know, if you're having a development agreement that pertains to a publicly owned property, should we be prioritizing affordable housing? Should we be prioritizing affordable artist studio space? Should we be prioritizing other things like civic space or whatever it may be? But just wanted to give you a little bit of background on where that came from. It was like one of the biggest things that came out of the conversation with the Committee for the Arts.
So maybe what the ID7 should say is evaluate, establish priorities such as affordable housing, artists, affordable studios, and all those other things you just mentioned in development agreements. Because isn't that the larger, or?
Yeah, I think so. There was also some ideas of, you know, could there be some kind of tax incentive to incentivize landlords to keep rents lower for working artists in their studio spaces. The 1D9, I think, is important. It relates to those different things, because then, you know, you're looking at what opportunities could come up and putting it on the radar, putting it out there that these could potentially be opportunities for affordable housing, affordable studio space, or other public benefits. I think all of those things, you know, when they get down to the implementation level, require their own community process to make sure that the community is driving whatever the decision is. But I think the role of the recommendation in this comprehensive plan is to put that idea out there, because maybe that's not being thought of. You know, if things come online right now, it might not even be a thought. So by having it in the plan, you know, that's something that the city could look at.
Sure. Is it public database of vacant properties, I'm assuming?
Yes.
And Greg, do we not have that already as a layer in GIS?
We don't have that level of specificity as a layer. There are identified properties through the building department when they become vacant. So there is that listing, and that's something that, you know, again, where we're going to put it or how we make that available. It's something that can be done. It's a public record when those are identified.
And the reason why I'm kind of scrolling back here is because I'm reading these two strategies and I'm thinking to myself, these are sort of both economic development and housing related, at least this 1D9 for sure. So I'm just kind of going, does it live in the housing stability goal? Or does it live in something more economic development related?
I guess the thing that I'm getting hung up on a little bit is that, we're trying to prioritize affordable housing for displaced households. And then in the next breath, we're talking about artist studios. And I think if we further define a live work space for artisans, it doesn't necessarily say, oh, I should have a place to paint, but a family of 4 doesn't have a place to live. Right. I mean, I guess, and not to be crass, but that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, I wouldn't want those things to be pitted against each other, so we should
Correct.
look correctly.
Right. And that's where I'm going, oh, I wonder if these two actually aren't 1D. I'm thinking they might actually be more, well, 1D9 could be either residential or commercial or mixed use. It could be kind of anything. But they could go, like, if we're talking about studio spaces particularly, maybe that belongs down where we're also talking about other kind of arts related economic development items down here in 1F, for example.
But the live work thing has always come up. And to me is different from an artist saying my studio rent has gone up. Right, because that artist is already living someplace, then they're working someplace else. And so again, super granular, but I think, not to pit one against the other is important.
I would agree with you, Rick. I think our lack of affordable housing problem is more important than promoting. I mean, I know the goal is promoting a place where people can live and work and artists can be happy, but affordable housing is much more of an important issue than incentivizing artists to live here, sadly, but true.
Well, I will say, and I'm saying this because I spoke to artists on the Committee for the Arts, there are a lot of artists, working artists, that have trouble affording to live here. It's not, one of the highest paying occupations and potential, depending on what kind of artist you are,
I know, but I mean, so do service workers and everybody else. Like, I mean, they're in the same boat as everyone.
Right. Why call them out? Right. I mean,
yeah. And so I think it's affordable housing, and that pertains to everybody. It's like artists, families, service workers, teachers, all these important groups to the community. But I think the recommendation on the development agreement side is you can ask for things, community benefits in a development agreement.
Yeah.
So that could be affordable housing, could be studio space, could be other things.
Yeah. So Alex, I think you know where we're coming from. Maybe you could rework this and then stuff about art. There was stuff about artists in a different section. I think it was economic development, right? So, and we can talk about in that section, supporting artists and having strategies for supporting artists. But housing just for artists in the housing section doesn't seem right to me, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think it should say housing for artists. And that's actually consistent with what the Committee for the Arts was talking about. They don't want it to say like affordable housing for artists.
And tax incentives is a very kind of a different thing. That's more economic also.
Yes, that's kind of what I was thinking too, is I'm going, oh, wow, I wonder if these two actually belong. I'm just going to go ahead.
I mean, tax incentives aren't going to get you a more affordable housing ever.
Down, like, are these actually about business retention, development, and growth? Because we already have other things on arts here.
Probably.
Yeah, I mean, I think working artists are falling in the category of businesses. And I think they also pertain to economic development and promoting tourism.
But I think to Alex's point earlier, including it not necessarily for live workspace, but this simply affordable studio space, trying to identify help identify buildings that could be utilized for that. A good example of that is the second story above Jalapenos. That wasn't developed into housing, but it was developed into, I think there's 7 smaller studio spaces up there for artists that they specifically develop it for that purpose,
But those
for
are
artist studios.
right, but I thought that space was live work, not just studio specific.
No, I don't think anyone lives up there. They didn't permit it that way. I think
No.
it's supposed to be studio space. But again, identifying potentials, this is definitely off the table at this point. But talking about surplus schools, East Gloucester Elementary School could have probably been pretty cheaply redeveloped into a pretty large complex for working artist studios, whereas redeveloping it into any type of housing, affordable or not, would not have been within the realm of possibility at that point for the city. So I do see a point to calling out the need to sort of focus on, and it is, I think, more an economic item as opposed to a housing item, but identifying, just like we would for the fishing industry and anybody else, trying to identify sources of opportunity for artists in the community as well.
I agree. Well said.
Yeah.
Okay, so assuming that we're shifting it into goal 1F, as a policy discussion of these 2 items, it sounds like 1F11, now the new 1F11 is a go. Understanding that it is actually a little bit flexible. It's not just necessarily business, but maybe we put it there. And then we have this as and I added a sort of for example here, but it's about identifying some strategies to support working artists with affordable studio spaces.
Great.
Good.
All right, so I'm gonna just highlight those now as green so I can track what I'm doing. All right, going back up, so we have one additional strategy idea to discuss for goal 1E, which is promote mixed use and live work opportunities in select locations to activate neighborhood centers and strengthen downtown. The new strategy idea is to offer short-term tax relief to landlords who allow use of vacant buildings for pop-up shops, artist studios, or community events.
I feel like, again, that's an economic thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree.
Anytime you talk about taxes, it seems like an economic idea.
So this wouldn't necessarily live under the mixed use and live work. It would be under support business retention, development, and growth.
I think so. And also, again, just, evaluate offering short-term tax relief. Tax relief. I don't know what the implications of that are. I mean, again, Gloucester budget is so tight and tax relief means less taxes. So there's pros and cons to that. If it means we can't pay the teachers and we have to do a Prop 2.5 override and blah, blah.
Yeah, they would have to crunch the numbers on it for sure.
Yeah, and I haven't seen this one yet. I'm not sure which group this came from, but I'm also curious about what incentives that is giving to property owners who now have maybe more of an incentive to leave a property vacant if they can get some tax breaks by doing that.
I mean, property taxes on a 3-family house are $5,000 a year, right? So that house could generate $60,000 worth of rental income. There's no incentive to leave it vacant.
I think this was trying to say incentivize them to fill the building if it's already vacant.
Can you say that again? I can't really hear you.
I think this one was intended, I think it came from the Committee for the Arts, and it was intended to say use tax relief to incentivize filling buildings with pop-up shops, studios, or community events if they're vacant. But that committee, you know, doesn't have the same kind of expertise as you do. And so if you have, now that we're moving it into the economic development area, if you want to edit it appropriately.
Well, it's not housing.
Right.
Yeah, my
Yeah,
understanding is that this is related to commercial buildings that are existing buildings, not vacant lots, but that are vacant buildings. This seems like if we were referring to vacant lots, I think that makes a lot of sense. But my only, you know, again, I'm just seeing this. My only pause is that it
You don't want to incentivize leaving the building vacant.
exactly right. Yeah.
Well, I see it more, and I don't know about the tax relief part, but when I read this, what I pictured are the pop-up shops on the ground floor of Harbor Village that Action has been allowing the use of. So that's sort of where I saw this, that if, again, we're using Harbor Village as an example, they have those commercial spaces intended for long-term commercial rent. They haven't booked any long-term commercial tenants in those. And so coordinating with the city, they've been doing a series of pop-up shops for various artists to come in for 2 or 3 months and operate out of there. That's what I saw this as, more of a pursuing that type of thing with various currently empty
So,
commercial buildings on Main Street, et cetera.
and how about Gloucester Crossing? Yikes. So maybe we mean vacant commercial spaces, not like vacant buildings. We need, right? We need.
I'm wondering too if we want to use the word underutilized here, or if we want to keep it just for vacant.
I like
Yeah.
underutilized.
I like that too.
Okay, so now it says evaluate offering incentives such as short-term tax relief for landlords to encourage activation of underutilized commercial spaces for pop-up shops, artist studios, or community events.
Great. Love it.
All right. So there's 4 more ideas, new ideas for under this economic development goal. One is to look for opportunities to use public facilities, especially aspiring school facilities, as opportunities to provide new community art spaces or studios. So that was 2 of these, I believe, are from Friends of the Arts. And then 2 of them, I believe, are from the EDIC. So the first 2 relate more to arts and the second more to that other committee. But okay, so there's the public facilities one, and then there's using public-private partnerships such as Friends of the Arts philanthropic model to support the acquisition of private buildings that come up for sale for the purpose of additional affordable art studio or live workspaces. And then it kind of shifts to a different theme, which is hiring a full or part-time EDIC director to help sustain that that function and support a steady revenue stream, and establishing regular communication channels, points of contact, and direct relationships with employers in Gloucester to help understand issues and retain businesses.
So the IF9, I think that's a no-brainer. Yes, of course, we should be doing that. And it's not, we're not asking, you know, it doesn't need to be funded, that particular action item. But explore opportunities to hire a full or part-time EDIC director. Like, that's really in a vacuum for me. I have no idea whether that's needed, how much it costs, whether it would pay for itself or not. Like, I have no way of evaluating that.
Yeah, I
Does that
think
go
that's
on
why
the
they kept the
presentation?
language as explore, you know, to evaluate exactly those things, Jane, that you just mentioned. As well as, you know, whether or not there is funding for it to be full-time versus part-time. And those are the kinds of things that it would just open up the door to look into.
Well, I think F8 and F9 really require a dedicated person to focus on that.
Oh, they do, even
and-
F9.
Yeah, I would say so. And maybe it is someone who is both doing that and supporting the EDIC in that effort.
I know that one of the strategies that the EDIC and others have been in strong support of is to hire somebody for the economic development position or to refill that role. So something that we talked about is kind of the order in which these things happen. So filling that role would be step one, and then that person, whoever is then in that role, would then be responsible for establishing those regular communication channels. So that was something that I think the EDIC was toying with a little bit, is how these play out in terms of ordering, which is something that I think Laura mentioned we will refer back to in the implementation matrix in terms of whether it's a short-term goal or more medium-term, longer-term. But I can say that from the EDIC's perspective, I think they felt strongly that they wanted both the economic development role filled as well as a director.
Well, then just put it all in
Funding
one,
for that. But
one strategy saying, explore the need for an EDIC staff person who would fulfill these various responsibilities and roles.
So you're suggesting combining F8 and F9?
Well, aren't you saying, is that 2 people or 1 person? I thought Alex just said that person would also be
Well,
doing.
it seems like it's a little more detailed than other recommendations, and it really just falls under the area of capacity building. There needs to be the capacity to for all the economic development initiatives in this plan. But these 2 things in particular.
But wouldn't a part-time, full-time or part-time EDIC director be doing what's outlined in 1F9?
I think they would, but in another sense, the EDIC is really focused on the Blackburn Industrial Park, and a lot of the biggest employers are there, but it's a question of, does the EDIC work on broader economic development initiatives as well?
Hey, well, you're out of my league and area of expertise here. So
I think it really should talk about building capacity and then refer to the potential for positions to support the EDIC and to have those regular communication channels with employers and businesses.
so Laura, will you just navigate to somewhere in here we talk about building capacity for the economic development? I just want to be able to refer back to that wording as we're looking at this.
So somewhere else there's build capacity.
Yeah, something about basically filling Sal's role of economic development director. I don't remember the
I mean, we
exact
have in goal
number.
2, we aren't there yet. We do talk in general about evaluating the organizational structure of departmental functions and capacity and things like that, as well as expanding staff capacity through other kinds of regional collaborations. So we have kind of a catch-all here for all kind of across the board.
Yeah, I
City
think we had one that was
functions,
specific
but if
to
it's
economic development director. Maybe can you just try to search maybe for economic development director? I apologize, I don't.
building coordination, capacity support, energy capacity, no. Good, no. Oh, there it is. Explore opportunities to build economic development capacity in Gloucester through a full or
Yeah.
part-time position or committee focused on high-level strategic initiatives in addition to small business support.
Yeah, I think it
So there-
needs to talk about staff and needs to be general to open up the opportunity for, say, multiple staff. Maybe that would be more advantageous than one director. So capacity, but not just capacity through a committee. It needs staff capacity.
Mhm. So take off or committee position or, and then like maybe parentheses S through one or more full or part-time positions.
Yeah,
Kind
and
of do
then,
that.
and then maybe the other recommendations could say, you know, utilize staff capacity to support the EDIC as well as the F9 recommendation. And I'd say economic development staff capacity, the way that you have in F1.
Mhm. So then in the, in the economic, or I'm sorry, I have to type first, then talk. In the implementation matrix, for example, we could have a suggested order, right? Where you have to build your capacity, short term, etc., and then medium term or long term, you're doing these other things once you have built up that capacity. Okay, so are we feeling better about these two? Are these two now in?
So I apologize. I didn't realize my mic was muted, but my understanding that EDIC was formed almost as an enterprise fund to operate the Blackburn Industrial Park. And so I don't know if we're using EDIC as sort of a generic term, or we're actually talking about expanding the scope of EDIC's responsibilities to be more citywide versus Blackburn specific. And that would be a question for Alex.
I mean, my conversations with the EDIC tell me that they are interested in expanding that scope. But, and I don't know if they talked about that when you were going through the comp plan.
Yeah, I think they were really interested in both an economic development director who is focused citywide, including things like small business support, but then also to have their own capacity for their initiatives that they feel like they don't currently have enough resources for.
I mean, I can talk to Tom Balfe about this, but I'd venture to say they're interested in exploring the expansion of their scope beyond Blackburn Industrial Park. So I'll talk to him about that because it may be worth identifying in this plan.
And I guess of course, I mean, to the extent that Blackburn is reasonably full and EDIC doesn't see much opportunity except for that one parcel that's been redeveloped. And so I don't know that they have a lot to do, right? And so that might be a driver, right? And so I think this is almost premature, this EDIC discussion, but I'm, happy to open the door. But it seems like a big step, not a little step.
And not everything has to go in the plan either, right? You're free to pursue things as they arise as well. If it doesn't necessarily make it in here, you can still do it.
Well, that's kind of my point.
Yeah. So I'm gonna assume that it sounds like these two are in. What about the ones related to the arts?
I mean, again, I don't have any real opposition to the idea. And I mean, there seems to be a lot of work in this direction. And everybody wants to support it. again, it seems like we're building a lot of language around something that may or may not happen. But again, it's like creating more housing. Yes, you're always for it. You just hope that this, there's strategies and implementations that actually can, fulfill the amount of, resources that we're putting, for these strategies and implementations. So it's,
Yeah, and I think they really relate. They're almost just the same thing said a little differently than the other recommendations we're looking at. So I think it's just a matter of looking at the other recommendations that we're talking about, development agreements and
yes.
publicly owned properties and things, and looking at this and finding the right way to describe it. But I do think it's important to call it out in the comp plan so that it's on the radar when opportunities come up in the future.
I mean, I would agree with that approach, right?
Okay, so I'll say these are in, but I'll also maybe make a note to look at the ordering of similar strategies and opportunities for consolidation
Yeah, that's fair.
related to parks. Okay. Alrighty. So these all came out as, there's a few in here that were in the middle that looked like they were now in without too much fuss. So with that, I'm going to jump to core theme 4. So a little bit of a change of topic here, because I do want to give, there's anything related to transportation that needs to get discussed, I want Juliet to have a chance to weigh in. Though it looked by and large like a lot of the transportation related strategies were pretty good to go. There is, so under this goal 4, create and support a comprehensive transportation network to provide safe and viable connections to key destinations. There is an additional strategy idea that was to be discussed around streamlining permitting for alternative transportation infrastructure.
And how would that be defined?
So I think it would be probably something in it could be a policy document or potentially in zoning, I suppose, or some sort of, preference or something to have it be more by right. But maybe my zoning or transportation experts here can also have talk about cases where they've seen this done.
But my question is, what's alternative transportation?
Exactly.
So that I interpreted that as to be anything other than a car, pretty much. So cyclist infrastructure, sidewalk, but something that's going to be an infrastructure. So probably, or a change in the roadway for prioritized bus lane, or I don't know. That's my interpretation of that.
So is permitting the barrier to that, or is there really more other things that could help bring alternative transportation
Yeah,
infrastructure?
who even does the permitting for that? It's not us.
I don't really understand this.
Yeah.
As someone who does transportation planning and design, I don't.
Yeah. I was just thinking to myself, I'm like, I don't know if I've ever come across that.
Okay, let's bag it.
Idea. Okay. All right. Great.
That one goes on you, Jane.
All right. All right. Bye-bye. All right. So then next up is under encouraging the use of alternative modes of transportation. So still in the middle here is to allocate funding to subsidize public transit costs for Gloucester residents, incentivize the use of Cape Ann Transportation Authority by implementing transportation demand management measures that can include subsidized transit fares, and transit subsidies can be partial, reduced, or wholesale.
So again, when you talk about allocate funding, I don't know if Gloucester has the capacity to allocate funding to anything. And
I would just point
Um,
out that CADA has reduced their fares, and I think right now it's free
Yeah.
to use CADA, so I think it's kind of more about building upon the success that CADA's having.
And they
I
had,
mean,
they were offering free rides through the end of the year for, I don't know what the extent of the free ride program they had, so I'd rather ask the question first and then, adopt a policy afterwards to see if that actually was, because they operate as their own entity, right? I mean, they're essentially a state agency, right?
there's
Yeah.
state.
No, they,
Well,
they operate as like as an independent agency, but it's an arch.
Sorry, Juliet, I can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Hold on.
what were you saying?
Is that better?
Yes,
yes,
actually it is,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, yeah, it's an RTA, so it's a regional transit agency, so they operate kind of independently, but they do depend on some coordination with the state. But
So
I
who-
think there's a couple things in here that I would encourage us to think about. Yeah, I agree about the comment about allocating funding. I think we need to be more clear about that and what the objectives are if CADA already has a plan in place to offer reduced fares and is operating kind of under its own, in collaboration probably with the city, but also is in charge of its own operations. But also the TDM part of this. I don't recall that Gloucester has a TDM program or anything like that. And that does take some management at the city level. If you're asking for example, contributions or some kind of documentation that developments or businesses are contributing to a TDM measure. So I just want to make sure that's clear.
I think there are some zoning changes that could be made for around TDM as well, right?
You can incentivize, yeah, you can do some incentivizing of TDM measures in zoning, but it does require some management of like if you're saying, like tracking, like similar to housing, right? If you're gonna require allocation of a certain percentage of housing, you have to track that. Similarly with TDM measures, if you're gonna ask for a business or a development to, for example, subsidize transit fares, you need to track that and have some kind of way of managing that.
I have enough expertise to weigh in on this.
and my concern is that, again, sort of my understanding that CADA is, operates, it's not a general fund entity, right? And so we're putting a master plan that we're going to talk to an outside agency and talk about, we're basically creating a strategy for somebody else's business, right? I mean, so again,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so
I think it could be more about, I think the city does this now, but it's still worth saying that you really coordinate with CADA to take advantage of it.
Yep.
And like one thing that comes into mind, and if we have festivals and things, if we got a lot going on the waterfront, we want to do something special with CADA to bring those people up to the downtown, that sort of thing, as well as the day-to-day kind of coordination. But the mayor sits on the CADA board. I think there is good coordination now, but talking about that, I think still worthwhile.
yeah, but my perspective is that CADA is offering that, and what this is saying to me is that we're requiring it from CADA, right? So if you have excess capacity at CADA and we have a jazz festival, yeah, you can use my bus, right? This is, there's, it's not a two-way street, it's a one-way street, right?
Yeah, would it make sense to maybe rephrase this to just say coordinate with CADA to remove potential barriers or, I don't want to say incentivize is always overused, but look at ways to increase utilization of CADA as a transportation mode?
That's what I was thinking. It's that to say coordinate with CADA to increase use of public transportation within the city.
Or support CADA's efforts to
And it seems like
And-
the city could help out with maybe creating spaces that people would know CADA shuttles stop at, or advertising it on signs.
But they have CADA on demand as well, right? Already.
Yeah. Mhm.
That's it, but that's part-time though. It's like, I think it's 5 days a week during business hours. But to Rick's point, CADA is very receptive to responding to community events. When we just did the lobster trap tree lighting last month, we arranged with Gordon's to allow for overflow parking in their lot, and asked CADA to provide shuttle service both during that afternoon, both from Gordon's and from Stageport. So they are really responsive to
Absolutely.
events.
Yeah, I mean, CADA's fantastic.
So I just want to interject here. It's 10 minutes before 6. I know that we've got a lot
Before
of.
8.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm in Utah. So I've got a hard stop in 10 minutes. And so if you guys want to continue, that's terrific. But I've got to finish up in 10 minutes.
I'm dying.
Yes.
I tried to warn you guys, this might be a long meeting. I figured we were probably gonna have to continue it to February 6th, but let's just take a quick peek ahead, because I think there's just this one, these two, we've got a bit to go here, but these don't relate to transportation at all. I just want to take a little peek. I think this is the last one related to transportation. So I just want to make sure we get through this one while we've got Juliet on the line here. And then the rest, if we want, can go to, February 6th, and we'll wrap up hopefully that day. Does that sound fair? So how are we doing on this strategy so far? Have we wordsmithed it to a good
So
place?
4B2, I think we're okay with moving forward.
I would
right.
suggest eliminating the reference to TDM and just
Oh, okay.
just end it to support. I think
Support their efforts.
I don't know, or just ended at increased use of public transportation. Was there really any need to add the rest of that?
I mean, if there's a separate recommendation on how we could do transportation demand management, I don't want to lose that. Maybe it just needs to be separate and
Yeah.
discussed differently.
And maybe it's more of a zoning thing potentially.
Yeah, because
Or
TDM
some
can
other
be
kind
more
of
than
thing.
just about TDM could be more than just about CADA.
Okay. Okay, and then we'll stick that as a good to go with some caveats of like, maybe this gets split off, right? So we'll have to circle back on that. All right. Well, why don't we just kind of forge ahead until we have the 8 o'clock stop? Does that sound
Sure.
okay to everyone?
Well,
Okay.
could I just bring up, because I think it's somewhat related to this one, is Discover Gloucester talked about, there are tour buses that come in, there are also cruise ships that come in, there's people that come in off the train, and there's not a great designated space for the buses, or maybe it's more that I guess it's two things. Is there spaces for people who are coming in as tourists who don't have cars, like whether that's a bus or another form? What is their transportation after that point? So any bike and ped kind of recommendations, I think, should also be speaking to supporting the circulation of tourists around the city as well, in addition to all the other great things that come from that. And also the second thing is there sort of like a city ambassador, like who kind of welcomes people who are visiting the city and make sure that they go and spend funds in Gloucester to benefit businesses here, that sort of thing.
So I know we have some strategies related to bike and pet infrastructure and targeting areas that are used by tourists, you know, especially around cultural districts, historic districts, you know, downtown harbor area. And for the other ambassador one, I think we had a strategy that was related to looking at how to best use like the visitor center and Discover Gloucester, you know, as how to it. I can't remember exact wording of it. I probably have to find it here. So we're partnering with local organizations like Discover Gloucester to promote the downtown area. We're connecting historic arts and cultural council with Discover Gloucester. Ah, here it is. There's this, we haven't gotten to it yet. We'll probably get into it more on February 6th then, but
Okay.
building on Gloucester's strengths with the Visitors Welcome Center and so
Yeah,
forth to create a
so
program
that,
to guide
yeah,
folks.
so that part of it's getting ahead, but the part on the
Mhm.
transportation piece is maybe like looking at designated places for tour buses and people are coming to visit, or in addition to wayfinding systems that direct them or help them get from those places, whether that be a bus, the train, cruise ship.
Yeah, I think we do have a strategy related to wayfinding already. Okay, and I'll just throw that in there just to take another look at it.
But I mean, Juliet, I'm just curious from your perspective, is there anything on the transportation side that we're missing here that we might want to look at?
Well, I actually was just gonna propose, I don't see anything missing, but I do see like under goal 4D that some of those items are actually not public transportation. I think there just needs some reorganization. Those first two items probably would belong in the alternative, I guess, or bike ped facility. And then I think you could put the CADA one in 4D. I think overall, it seemed like you covered, you know, the multimodal components pretty well.
So well, now I'm seeing that, yeah, we're going to have to do a little bit of reorganization because right now we have, then that leaves one strategy under that one. But I think, like you said, we've got another one that we just were talking about here. So maybe we just have everything under that one. And we don't even necessarily need this one because we, in a way,
Right.
we're already getting that goal. Yeah. Okay. So I think that any of the remaining strategies, new ideas and so forth are related to open space or recreation or public health. So I think with that, we're probably all set until next time. I don't know that we're going to get through, let's see, there's a number of them here. So we might have to just.
Those are going to be easier though, honestly.
Yeah.
Like who would be against continuing wastewater evaluation? Nobody.
All right, so those will go more quickly. Well,
sorry,
here's the other
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to bring up there, the 4C is the description is that it's recreational, but there actually are a number of items under there that aren't just recreational.
I mean, like the biking is more transportation.
Yeah. So that may be worth just, again, either rewording the goal or, you know, moving around some of those.
Yeah, I would reword the goal, to be honest. I wouldn't just have it be recreational. Could be for any purpose.
In that case, I'd call it develop the city's network of walking and biking facilities.
Okay, so I know Rick's gotta go. But are others on their last brain cell, or I'm able to keep going, or if you want to call it a night, I'm good either way.
I'm pretty done, not gonna lie. I'm also starving.
Yeah, I'd hate to have Rick not included in the rest of the conversation, so.
All right. Well, thank you. It was a really productive conversation. Thank you so much. I know it's a little bit of a slog to get into so much detail, but it's really, important. We're just at that stage in the process, but this is really thoughtful and productive. So I look forward to continuing the conversation on the 6th. And in the meantime, I'll come back at another iteration with the wordsmith version, and we can continue on then.
Right. And I guess just in closing, the overarching sort of softening the action words and evaluating, and replacing with evaluating or exploring, just as a general just review, right? I mean, so we'll probably get caught up in the other section with similar language, but so we don't have to stop at every sentence to, change a word in a strategy.
Yeah.
So,
And check.
Yeah, I made a little comment in the side to kind of take a pass through.
Document wide, right?
Mm-hmm.
Terrific. All right. Well, thanks everybody for your time. This has been productive.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thank
night.
you.
So we'll need it. We need a roll call for adjournment.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adjourn.
I have a motion. I need a second.
So moved.
A motion by Jane Ramsden, second by Doug Cook. Roll call vote, please.
Member Noonan,
Yes.
Member Remsen,
Yes.
Member Cook,
Yes.
Member Henry,
Yes.
and Member Rosen.
Yes.
Have a good night.
So.
Night,
Bye.
folks.
Okay.